So, like I said, I'm adding this in here just for food for thought. Just something else to think about for some people. Maybe this answers some questions, unlock some doors, clear some things up for some people. So, in the context to everything previously in this video, I would like to say that let's just say that on levels 3 and 4, this is where people are more group focused, right? And on levels 1 and 2, people are usually more inward focused, right? These are the common stereotypical decisions and trains of thought at these levels. And there is a clear divide between level 2 and level 3, right? And, don't take any of this stuff too seriously because we're all on different levels at different times and in different things. And these aren't permanent statuses. Even moment to moment, you can shift one way, this way, that way. And, argument in a conversation, you throw out a low blow or something that just completely doesn't need to be said, something just to hurt someone. And, it just derails attention from the solution and from the goal. And it just slows stuff down and gunks stuff up. Yeah, then that's a level 1 thing to say. When it happened, you can see the effects. And then, of course, right? No matter where you were before that moment, once you derail it, it's derailed and you have to work your way back up into a solution focused mentality. And, now you have to deal with the new conflict and obstacle and resolution and, negotiate with that too. So this is just something to think about when we're in those moments to try to help us balance, try to help us say, okay, where am I at? What are my intentions? Who am I trying to be right now? Am I trying to be this version of myself or that version of myself? Am I trying to be more of a level 1 version of myself or a level 4 version of myself? Right. And as you can see, this also correlates with levels of control, right? As opposed to just levels of knowledge or information, right? It has to do with levels of control. And therefore, they're directly leading to solution. And this is directly taking action towards a solution at levels 3 and 4. But at levels 1 and 2, it just doesn't mean that you're useless or a non-factor or something. Assumingly level 2 input on a situation would be more constructive and positive, and build more momentum than a level 1 input on the situation. And if you find yourself not in a position of control in a situation, then it's perfectly fine to occupy a level 2 position and try to provide information as you can, not information in an attempt to gain control or, manipulate the situation or anything like that. It's in a real constructive manner. If you're going to be the one in charge, then you go ahead and be the one in charge. You hop into level 3. You don't be a backseat driver. That's not what this is about. When you're in level 3, then you're there. You're taking the action. You're taking the responsibility. It's your duty. And, that's crossing the barrier. And then there you have to accept the criticism and the conflict and the critique because that's what it takes to find a solution. And that's the effect of finding solutions is people go forward. And when they go forward, they look back and they say, man, what was that like? Remember what that was like? The goal is that you want to keep people moving forward. When they're always moving forward, they're more happy than when they're stuck in the same place and they're looking back and it's where they're still at. You know what I'm saying? And level one, and level one, uh, one of the main things I would say is people usually have criticism here instead of critique, right? That's one of the things that might separate level one from level two is the level one might not be constructive or have any way to provide value. Now, like I say, we got to be adults here. We got to be real with ourselves, and that's up to you on what you're saying. Is it really constructive? Is it really positive? Is it, constructive in what I would like to happen, or is it constructive in what the entire group would like to happen, or this person would like to happen, whoever I'm negotiating with? Because the level one thing to do is to think that you're providing critique, but it just be criticism, and then you use it, and then you use the criticism to emotionally hijack the situation. And rather than presenting paths forward, you actually represent barriers and you bring more problems, right? Your your solutions, your criticisms introduce more problems and make solutions harder to come by, right? And they slow the process down. But level three and four, this is where action lies, this is where control lies, and this is where dreams become reality and desires become memories, Things that you wanted are things that you have. Places you want to be are places you're at. Places you didn't want to be, places you were, and places you've left. Your story is contained in how you behave and react of each chapter of your life. Um, to me, aiming to be solution focused means that you're going to be trying to occupy level two and four as much as you can, to just try to be moving forward and trying to keep the overall energy level up of yourself and everyone around you, right? To be a strong link in the chain and to strengthen the other links around you, right? You don't want to be wearing down the other links that are attached to you, right? That are closest to you. You want to be a strong link and you want to help keep the other links strong too. You could think of the moon, you could think of the full moon as a chapter marker for practical purposes, right? Just don't try to force it. Don't try to sweat it. It's not, forcing your life to change at this chapter and that chapter and just, it just has to go this way and that way. It's not something to abuse. This is the real world. This is nature. Don't play with nature. You're going to get taught pretty quick. So it's just about learning how to ride the wave, to get along with the current, to get along with the natural motion that's going on, to use it as a balancing force, something that's there, something that's present, is stabilizing, is solid, consistent, and it can help you be on these same things too. All right, so here's just a different way of explaining this same kind of concept and giving you like a real world example and application of this. You can do it in a lot of different ways. Honestly, one of my favorite ways and one of the most valuable ways I think this stuff should be applied would be in direct arguments or conflicts with people, interpersonal conflicts with people. But I'm leaving that for future videos and education and talks. Here, though, you can see this is for like the military, right? And some people don't really like this example. I got another one coming after that more people seem to like, but I'll just run through this one real quick. Uh, it basically just shows people's proximity to, you know, the action and the real thing, and just shows, based on their level of familiarity or experience with this thing, how they might perceive some things of the world or just their position on certain things, right? So, it just goes from those people who have never met someone or don't really know anybody in the military and how they would perceive and interact and the opinions that they would have on the military and stuff and how it goes, right? And then it goes to family and friends, people who actually know someone in the military who actually has some type of contact or experience with it, right? These people can act as basically like fact checkers, right? For people on the first level. Not that they need to be, doing that, but it's just showing that they have actual real information and experience just based on their proximity, just based on knowing somebody, right? They'll know, just small little details, maybe the difference between boot camp and basic training, or this branch does this and that branch does that, or just, the small things you learn from actually being there and being involved, right? But not actually being in the service, right? And so here's the big gap between level two and three is what level three is the people who are actually in the military, right? So these people end up possessing intimate knowledge about the military, right? They end up knowing stuff that they can't even explain to people or wouldn't even explain to people or talk about or whatever unless it somehow came up. And it would basically never come up or be interesting enough to come up in conversation with people unless it was likely with someone else who had been in the military, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't really be anywhere for people to ground themselves in a conversation, right? Or anybody that maybe hasn't been in or doesn't know anything about it. They're just going to hear, cool story, bro, and move on. You won't even be able to really identify all the things that you know that they don't know, because it's just so many little things, right? And I want to pause right here on that point because at level two, you have people like military historians, right? College professors, um, people who have known many people, in the military and have decades and decades of experience having people very close to them be in those situations and stuff. These people can oftentimes possess more information or deeper knowledge uh, on particular subjects and situations than someone who is actually in the military, right? On specific topics, and they just haven't reached that level of experience or longevity to be able to have those opinions or that information, right? But that doesn't erase the fact that there are innumerable, little details that the people who are active would know and be intimately aware of. Even the military historians, military experts, if they have not served themselves, they just can't come to grips with or terms with some of this information because they just haven't seen it, haven't experienced it, haven't had it come up. It's just a gap that they don't know is there. They don't know what they don't know, right? And there's a lot of things that certain people just can't tell them that they don't know, right? But skipping back ahead, level four, you have the stereotypical top of the chain of command or, Illuminati or whatever. If you think that they're puppet masters, or something controlling the people at the top, if you have that level of knowledge or information, then yeah. It's just the people who are making the decisions that everyone else is learning about and educating themselves on. This is where the decisions come from that the historians study and they try to quantify and put into context and come to terms with. This is where the action and order and movements of the people on level three come from this higher level, right? But trying to move on to a slightly maybe more easy example is just with sports, right? So you have people who are new and/or uninterested with a sport, right? They don't watch it, they don't know it, right? Then you have the people on the next level who watch it, they know something about it, right? And now I'm using NASCAR here to try to really drive home this point, right? Of information on level two and knowledge on level two because you've seen I put student there, you've seen or heard me mention that experts and historians and people with high levels of knowledge lie at level two. And I put NASCAR here because now there are sim drivers, right? Simulated drivers, people who are learning how to drive on a computer video game at home, right? And then they're taking that and then they're transferring that into the real world. Like, so I put this in here to show because I think his name is Denny. Is it Denny Hamlin or uh Denny something? I think he's a race car driver, and I'm pretty sure he's the one where he started in sim and now he's one of the top drivers. I think it's an important thing to note that at level two you can have expert levels of knowledge. Like you can get to that level, but I cannot stress enough, and this is the big thing. It doesn't matter unless you're a driver, right? Until you hop in the car from being a sim driver to a real world driver and put that experience and knowledge to the test, you get operational experience. It might take you 1 week or 2 weeks to get your feet under yourself and then boom, you're off to the races. But until you put in that 1 or 2 weeks or 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 months, getting that real experience, you cannot put yourself, theoretically on this third level. You cannot just say that, you cannot just assume that you have a higher level of control or just even provably general knowledge than the people on level three, even if, you are highly educated and have for sure more information. It's just until you have operational experience and put it to the test, it doesn't matter. But then you get to level three, boom, playing the sport, right? Taking control, being in the situation, hopping in the water, right? Now you're getting operational experience, operational control, you know, adjusting to those little things that everyone else doesn't even know about. But, all the guys that are in the water, they know exactly what temperature it is. And they know how it feels after you've been in that water for a while. And this is where you get to and this is where you get to going with the current, picking up speed, riding a wave, and getting in action. And of course, the highest level of action and control is not the top, the team owners, right? The people who control the players and the organizations and are more or less the reason for all the fans and the players and everyone gathering there is because, these people at the top are putting money into the system, making decisions, putting teams together you know, the sport to be played. They're organizing everything, putting in everything into place so that when people come there, they have the referees, the rules, the players, the stadium, everything is in order and it's ready to be enjoyed. And that basically covers that, like I say, I like to emphasize that there's, a gap between levels two and three. The gap itself is becoming active. It's perfectly fine to have knowledge at level two, but you don't have, experience until level three. And that experience gives you even more knowledge that's vitally important. The separation between levels two and one are also between serving the self and looking inward and serving others and looking outward, right? The drivers are there as entertainers. The sports team owners are there as setting up entertainment events, and the fans are there what as spectators, as wanting to be entertained, The new and uninterested, they're there wanting to be educated, wanting to be entertained. And also levels three and four. So the drivers and the team owners, they're in control of what happens. They're in control of who wins and who loses. Why? Because they're the ones doing it. And the fans and everyone else, they're just hearing about it. They're just watching it. They're just, taking in the emotions of the situation and forming opinions on that, and that's their space. And people can move from one level to another at any given time. Can a team owner become uninterested in his own sports team? The his own his own asset is perfectly true. Can Can a team owner be a driver? Can a driver become a team owner? Can the driver be a fan and the fans become drivers? And it's all shiftable at any given moment, week, day. None of these are necessarily solid states, even when they feel like it. So it's just food for thought. Again, thank you. Like, comment, subscribe.